Have you started to feel a growing distance between you and your adult children? Maybe your phone calls are becoming shorter, more surface level, or even unreturned. Perhaps your once cherished family visits are now infrequent or feel tense and rushed, leaving you wondering what changed and why it feels like you're drifting apart from the very people you love most. If you've found yourself replaying conversations, second-guessing your words, or feeling heartbroken by their silence, you're not alone, and you're not a bad parent. The truth is, many older parents unknowingly use certain phrases that, while seemingly harmless or well-intentioned, can create emotional distance, resentment, and even long-term damage to the relationship. I've spent over a decade counseling families through these quiet breakdowns, and time again, I've seen how just a few common expressions can push adult children away, sometimes to the point of complete estrangement. That's why today I'm going to reveal 6 toxic phrases that parents should never say to their grown children, including one that's so emotionally triggering it could be the final straw. But this isn't about blame. It's about awareness, growth, and change. By the end of this video, you'll not only recognize the hidden landmines in your everyday language, but you'll also walk away with healthier alternatives that invite connection, trust, and genuine closeness. Before we begin, if you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss any videos. If you enjoy this video, please type 1 in the comments. If you don't like it, type 0 in the comments to let me know so I can make better videos for you. Now let's get started. Toxic phrase 1. After everything I've done for you. Have you ever felt unappreciated or taken for granted by your adult children, and in a moment of frustration or sadness, found yourself blurting out the words, "After everything I've done for you"? If so, you're not alone. Many loving parents who have given decades of their lives to raising their children have felt that sting of being overlooked, especially when their efforts seem to go unnoticed. The desire for acknowledgement is deeply human. But while this phrase may feel like an honest expression of that pain, experts caution that it's one of the most damaging things a parent can say to an adult child. According to Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a renowned family therapist and professor at Northwestern University, this phrase subtly turns a relationship that should be grounded in unconditional love into a transactional ledger, one where the parent is the giver and the child becomes permanently in debt. When parents say, "After everything I've done for you," they're unintentionally framing their care, sacrifices, and support as something that now demands repayment, says Dr. Martinez. But love isn't a business deal, and when children feel like they're being asked to settle an emotional debt they never agreed to, it breeds resentment, guilt, and emotional distance. Consider the story of Gregory, a 76-year-old retired accountant from Phoenix. He had always prided himself on providing a stable home, funding his son's education, and being available whenever needed. But as the years passed, Gregory noticed his calls went unanswered more often and visits had become increasingly rare. During one of their few dinners together, his frustration boiled over. With a heavy sigh, he looked at his son and said, "After everything I've done for you, putting you through college, helping with your first car, the least you could do is call me once a week." What Gregory thought was a heartfelt plea for connection instead triggered years of pent-up frustration in his son, who finally snapped, "Dad, I can't take the guilt trips anymore. I don't want every conversation to feel like I'm failing you." That dinner ended in silence, and it took weeks, and the help of a family counselor, before either of them reached out again. Gregory eventually realized that what he had really been feeling wasn't anger, it was loneliness, and that phrase, though rooted in longing, came across as manipulative rather than sincere. With the therapist's guidance, Gregory began practicing a new form of communication, one that was honest about his needs without casting blame. Instead of guilt, he started using words like, "I really miss hearing your voice," or, "It would mean a lot to me if we could have a regular time to catch up. Would Sundays work for you?" That shift changed everything. His son felt seen rather than shamed, and responded with more openness and consistency. Their conversations grew warmer, and the emotional wall between them slowly came down. Here's the truth. Parenting is a profound act of love, but it's not a transaction. Your children didn't choose to be born, and the sacrifices you made as a parent were part of the unconditional care you gave them, not an investment demanding returns. When you release the expectation of repayment and instead focus on building connection in the present, you create a space of mutual respect, not obligation. So if you've ever felt the urge to say, "After everything I've done for you," pause for a moment. Ask yourself what emotion is really beneath those words. Is it sadness? Is it loneliness? Is it a desire to feel valued? Then find a way to express that directly, with warmth, honesty, and vulnerability. It's in those moments of authenticity that healing can begin, and the bond with your adult children can become stronger than ever. Toxic phrase. 2. Your spouse is turning you against me. This one phrase, often uttered in a moment of hurt or frustration, can do irreversible damage to your relationship with your adult child. Of all the toxic phrases, this is perhaps the most dangerous. Experts in family psychology agree. Accusing your child's spouse of driving a wedge between you is like striking a match near a bridge already under strain. It places your child in a painful, impossible position, forced to choose between loyalty to the partner they've built a life with and the parent who raised them. Dr. James Wilson, director of the Family Systems Institute, explains the dynamic this phrase creates. When a parent says, "Your spouse is turning you against me," it doesn't just attack the partner. It challenges the child's independence, their emotional intelligence, and their ability to make healthy decisions. It turns what should be a triangle of connection, parent, child, and spouse, into a battlefield. According to Dr. Wilson, this blame-driven narrative breeds defensiveness, guilt, and ultimately distance. Take the story of Barbara, a 68-year-old retired teacher from Seattle and proud grandmother-to-be, though sadly she didn't get to meet her first grandchild until nearly 2 years after the birth. Barbara had always been close with her son, Daniel, especially after her husband passed away. But after Daniel got married to Sarah, Barbara started feeling shut out. Calls became less frequent. Invitations to dinner were declined. When she did see Daniel, he seemed distracted, hesitant, almost like he was walking on eggshells. Barbara's hurt gradually turned into suspicion. Rather than express her feelings openly, she began making passive-aggressive remarks. "I bet Sarah doesn't want you spending too much time with me," or "You never acted like this before you got married." What Barbara didn't know was that Daniel, deeply protective of his wife, shared these comments with Sarah, creating an undercurrent of pain and tension in their marriage. Sarah began to feel resented and blamed, and Daniel felt torn between defending his wife and maintaining his bond with his mother. The final blow came during a family barbecue when Barbara, after a couple glasses of wine, told a cousin within earshot of everyone, "Well, I've basically lost my son since he got married." That night, Daniel sent her a long message. He explained that for their own emotional well-being, he and Sarah needed some space from the relationship. That space turned into 18 silent, heartbreaking months. Barbara missed holidays, birthdays, and most painful of all, the birth and first year of her granddaughter's life. It took tremendous humility, professional counseling, and a heartfelt apology from Barbara to begin rebuilding that fractured connection. She eventually came to understand that her comments weren't just about her pain, they were also undermining the sacred bond of her son's marriage. Through counseling, she learned new language to express her emotions without blaming, and how to honor her son's autonomy while still being present as a loving mother and grandmother. Now, Barbara takes a different approach. When she feels distant or unsure, she says things like, "I really value both of you. I want to make sure I'm being supportive of your family in the best way I can. Are there times that work well for us to catch up or spend time together?" This small but powerful shift has reopened the doors of communication, and Barbara is now a welcome presence in her son's home once again. Here's the truth. Once your child enters into a long-term partnership or marriage, their spouse becomes their primary emotional partner. Challenging that relationship, whether directly or subtly, will always backfire. Instead, seek to build a bridge with both of them. Show respect for their partnership and look for ways to become a trusted, supportive figure in their shared life. So the next time you feel excluded or left out, pause. Resist the urge to point fingers or blame their partner. Instead, center the conversation on connection. Say, "I care about both of you. I'd love to be more involved in your lives. How can I support that in a way that works for everyone?" Respecting their relationship is the surest way to keep yours with them strong. Toxic phrase. 3. In my day, we did things differently. At first glance, this phrase may seem harmless, even nostalgic. But beneath the surface, it often sends a message that stings far more than parents intend. It quietly implies that today's choices, values, or parenting methods are inferior to those of the past. and when said often enough, it can drive a wedge between generations that's difficult to bridge. According to communication experts, phrases like, "in my day," can unintentionally trigger defensiveness and frustration in adult children. Dr. Sophia Chen, a professor of intergenerational studies at Boston University, explains the deeper psychological impact. When parents frequently reference their own era as the gold standard, they're not just reminiscing, they're framing their experience as the benchmark for right and wrong. This often makes adult children feel like they're being subtly judged, even if that's not the parent's intention. This was exactly the case for Timothy, a 74-year-old retired firefighter from Nashville, who was overjoyed to become a grandfather. He loved spending time with his daughter Rachel and her toddler son, but noticed that their conversations around parenting had become increasingly tense. Rachel seemed defensive and curt, especially when Timothy offered advice. He would often begin conversations with, "Well, in my day, we didn't fuss about screen time," or, "Back in my day, kids played outside until dark without all this constant supervision." What Timothy thought were harmless observations were, to Rachel, veiled criticisms. She felt like her parenting choices were being constantly second-guessed by someone who didn't understand the pressures and information parents face today. It all came to a head one afternoon when Rachel snapped after another unsolicited comment. Fighting back tears, she told her father that every time he said, "in my day," she felt small, like she was failing as a mom and being compared to a past she couldn't live up to. The room went quiet. For the first time, Timothy realized his words, though meant to share his perspective, were creating distance between him and his daughter. Determined to repair their connection, Timothy sought advice from a local grandparenting workshop. There, he learned a powerful truth. Sharing your experience is valuable, but only when it's offered with respect and curiosity, not superiority. He began changing how he communicated with Rachel. Instead of comparing eras, he asked questions like, "How are things different for parents now?" Or, "What's the thinking behind that approach?" One day, after observing his grandson wearing a harness in a busy park, Timothy felt the urge to say, "We never used things like that in my day." But instead he paused and asked, "Is that for safety in crowds?" "Seems like a smart idea." Rachel smiled. That small moment of validation and understanding meant the world to her. Over time, their relationship grew stronger. Rachel even began asking Timothy for advice because she no longer felt judged, just supported. His shift in language opened the door to mutual respect and trust, where both old wisdom and new methods could coexist. Here's the key. Rather than drawing a line in the sand between past and present, invite connection through curiosity. You might say, "I'd love to hear more about how you're approaching this. Would you be open to hearing what worked for me back then, in case any of it is useful?" This repositions your lived experience as a resource, not a critique. Remember, your role as a parent doesn't end when your child becomes an adult. It evolves, and to maintain that relationship, it's critical to adapt the way you communicate. Offering your perspective with openness rather than nostalgia helps ensure your voice remains a welcomed presence in your adult child's life, not a source of stress. So the next time you feel the urge to say, "in my day," consider instead, "help me understand how you're seeing this." Because building bridges across generations starts not with correction, but with connection. Toxic phrase. 4. You never visit or call me. This phrase is one of the most emotionally charged expressions a parent can utter, and one of the most damaging. It may arise from a place of deep loneliness or longing, but to your adult children, it often lands as a guilt-laced accusation rather than a heartfelt plea. And when phrases like "you never call" or "you never visit" become a pattern, they can slowly erode the desire to stay in touch altogether. Psychologists call this kind of language emotional absolutism, when someone uses extreme words like never, always, or constantly to express disappointment or frustration. Dr. Michael Ramirez, family psychologist and author of Healing Family Relationships, explains, absolute statements like "you never visit" create a no-win situation for adult children. Even if they called last week or visited last month, that effort is dismissed. It sends the message that whatever they're doing is never enough, and that's a heavy burden to carry. Evelyn, a 70-year-old retired librarian from Chicago, found herself in this very trap. Widowed for 5 years and living alone, she often felt isolated, especially during long, quiet weekends. Her daughter, Julia, was a busy working mom of two, juggling a demanding job, her kids' after-school activities, and a never-ending to-do list. Whenever Julia called, Evelyn would say things like, "You never call me anymore," or, "I guess I'm not a priority for you." Evelyn didn't mean to be hurtful. She was just aching for more connection, but what she didn't realize was that her words were quietly pushing Julia away. Each call ended in guilt and tension, and eventually, Julia began to dread picking up the phone. The turning point came during a lunch with an old friend who gently asked Evelyn to reflect on her recent conversations. That night, Evelyn took out a notebook and began recording every interaction she had with her daughter: calls, texts, photos sent, and video chats with the grandkids. Within a few weeks, she was stunned to see how frequent their communication really was. The issue wasn't that Julia didn't care, it was that Evelyn's expectations didn't match reality. She wanted daily connection, but Julia was already giving what she could. The next step was transformative. Evelyn started seeing a therapist to talk about the root of her loneliness, and more importantly, how to communicate her needs without guilt. Instead of focusing on absence, she began to express appreciation. She would text, "I loved our chat yesterday. Your story about Emma's school project made my day." Or she'd say on the phone, "Thank you for sending those photos. I looked at them 3 times today." It means so much to feel included. And something beautiful happened. Julia began reaching out more often, not because she felt guilty, but because she felt wanted, welcomed, and appreciated. The relationship warmed and deepened because the pressure was replaced by positivity. Here's the takeaway: loneliness is real and it deserves to be acknowledged, but the way you communicate that longing can either build bridges or burn them. Instead of an accusation, try an invitation. I treasure our time together. I've been feeling a bit lonely lately and would love to find a regular time to connect that works for your schedule. What might that look like? This shows vulnerability without blame and invites collaboration rather than conflict. It creates space for your child to respond with empathy rather than retreat in frustration. Remember, adult children are more likely to stay connected when they feel celebrated, not chastised. By shifting from absolute statements to open-hearted conversations, you're making room for deeper, more joyful connections. Toxic. Phrase 5. Why can't you be more like? Insert name. At first glance, this phrase may appear harmless, just a casual observation, perhaps meant to encourage better behavior or more success. However, beneath the surface, it can have deep, lasting consequences on your relationship with your adult children. When you compare your children to others, whether it's a sibling, a relative, a friend, or even a colleague, you're sending a message that they're not enough as they are. Over time, this can lead to a sense of inadequacy, competition, and resentment. What may seem like a harmless comment can feel like a rejection of their individuality and uniqueness. Dr. Emily Foster, a renowned family therapist who specializes in family dynamics, explains that comparing your child to someone else makes them feel less than. It's a direct attack on their self-esteem and individuality. Instead of feeling loved for who they are, they feel like they are a constant disappointment. This kind of comparison can create a silent rift that might never heal. Let me illustrate this with a real-life example. Take the case of Linda, a 72-year-old mother from Denver, who deeply admired her eldest daughter, Kathy. Kathy was everything Linda had dreamed for her children. She was a highly successful lawyer, happily married, and had children of her own. Linda was extremely proud of Kathy's accomplishments, but over time she began making frequent comparisons between Kathy and her youngest daughter, Sarah. She would often say things like, "Why can't you be more like Kathy? She always calls me, she has her life together. You could learn so much from her." What Linda didn't realize was the hurt she was causing. Sarah, a creative and independent artist, had a much different path. She hadn't followed the traditional route. She didn't have a stable corporate job, a spouse, or children yet. She had recently gone through a difficult breakup which left her feeling vulnerable. Linda's constant comparisons made Sarah feel inadequate, as though no matter what she did, she would never be able to measure up to her sister's picture-perfect life. The comparisons wounded her deeply, and over time she began withdrawing. She stopped calling her mother, and they had fewer and fewer interactions. Linda, unaware of the true cause, couldn't understand why her relationship with Sarah had become so strained. The turning point came when Linda and Sarah attended family therapy together. In one of their sessions, Sarah bravely opened up about how Linda's comparisons to Kathy had made her feel like a disappointment. She shared that she felt like she could never live up to her mother's expectations and that, no matter what she achieved, it would never be good enough. Linda was heartbroken by this revelation. She hadn't meant to hurt Sarah, but she now understood that her well-meaning remarks had planted a seed of self-doubt and resentment in her daughter. Linda felt guilty and regretful, but she was determined to make things right. Over time, with professional guidance, she began to truly listen to Sarah and appreciate her for who she was, an individual with her own unique journey and talents. Instead of continuing to compare, Linda began to show genuine interest in Sarah's art and her creative process. She would ask open-ended questions like, "I'd love to hear more about your art. What's inspiring you these days?" Or, "What's been exciting for you in your creative projects?" This shift in perspective allowed Sarah to feel seen, valued, and respected for her individuality. She no longer felt the need to live up to someone else's standards or be anything other than herself. It wasn't an overnight transformation, but with time, Linda's relationship with Sarah began to improve. Sarah felt that her mother saw her for who she was, not for who she wasn't. They reconnected on a deeper level, and Sarah began to open up more, knowing that her mother no longer saw her as a failure or a disappointment. This change in communication didn't just improve their relationship. It helped Linda see the richness in Sarah's life and her own unique successes. The lesson here is clear. If you find yourself making comparisons, whether consciously or unconsciously, it's time to stop. No child should ever feel like they are in competition with their sibling, a family friend, or anyone else. Each person is unique, with their own gifts, passions, and paths in life. Rather than focusing on the things your child might be lacking, celebrate who they are and what they've achieved on their own terms. Instead of saying, "Why can't you be more like?" try expressing something like, "I love the person you are, and I'm so proud of what you've achieved in your own way. I want to support you in everything that makes you happy, and I'm here to help however I can." This shift in language helps your children feel like they are loved for who they are, not for who they are compared to. It encourages them to feel comfortable in their own skin and reinforces the idea that they don't need to change to be worthy of your love and admiration. By eliminating this toxic phrase from your vocabulary and replacing it with a more supportive approach, you create space for your children to thrive as their own individuals. This not only fosters a healthier family dynamic, but also strengthens the bond of trust and affection between you. Toxic. Phrase 6. I'm your mother, con father, you have to listen to me. As parents, there's an inherent authority that comes with the role. You've spent years nurturing and guiding your children, and in many ways your experience provides valuable wisdom. However, there's a fine line between offering guidance and using your authority as a tool for control. When phrases like, "I'm your mother's shark father, you have to listen to me," are used, it can have a profound and often negative impact on the relationship with your adult children. Dr. Margaret Thompson, a family dynamics expert, explains that this phrase infantilizes adult children. It positions them as children in their own home, and that's something they'll resist. It often causes feelings of disrespect and resentment because it doesn't recognize that they are now adults with their own lives, values, and decisions to make. When parents invoke their authority in such a commanding way, it sends the message that their adult children are still dependent, not capable of making their own choices. This may seem harmless to a parent, but for the child, it can feel like they're being dismissed, belittled, or not trusted to make decisions that are important to their life. As your children grow into adults, they crave autonomy and respect. They need to be able to trust themselves and their own judgment. When that trust is undermined by an authoritarian approach, it can create significant tension in the relationship. Take the story of Roger, a 74-year-old father from Orlando. Roger was concerned about his son Michael, who had recently switched careers. Roger, like many parents, had strong opinions about his son's future and believed the decision was a mistake. In an effort to guide him, Roger began to lecture his son, saying things like, "I'm your father. You have to listen to me. This job change is a terrible idea." Michael, who was in his early 30s, had carefully considered his decision to switch careers. It wasn't a choice he made impulsively, but rather one he felt was best for his growth and happiness. When his father started lecturing him in this way, Michael felt his independence was being stripped away. He didn't ask for advice. He was simply sharing a life update. The more Roger insisted, the more Michael felt disrespected, as if he were still a child who needed permission to make his own decisions. The constant pressure To comply with Roger's views began to feel stifling, and as a result, Michael started withdrawing. He stopped sharing updates about his life, avoided his father's calls, and began to shut down the lines of communication. Roger, in his mind, was just offering advice based on his experience. He felt that, as a father, he had the right to guide his son and make sure he didn't make a mistake. But what he didn't realize was that his insistence wasn't being received as helpful advice. It was being perceived as an attempt to control his son's life. The situation continued to deteriorate until a breakthrough conversation occurred. Michael, feeling frustrated and hurt, sat down with his father and explained how Roger's approach made him feel. He told Roger that when his father said, "You have to listen to me," it felt as though he was being treated like a child who wasn't capable of making decisions on his own. Michael expressed that he wanted to feel respected as an adult and trusted to make his own choices, even if they weren't always in line with what his father would have chosen. This conversation was a turning point for Roger. He had never realized how his words were affecting his son. He thought he was acting in Michael's best interest, but in reality, he was causing his son to feel disrespected and dismissed. Roger was deeply sorry for the way his actions had pushed his son away and decided to change his approach. Instead of continuing to use his parental authority as a means of control, Roger learned to become a more supportive and empathetic presence in Michael's life. He stopped imposing his views and started listening more attentively to Michael's perspective. When Michael talked about his career changes or any future plans, Roger would respond with statements like, "I can see you've thought this through and that this decision is important to you. I trust your judgment, but if you ever want advice or want to talk things through, I'm here to listen." This subtle shift in language was incredibly impactful. It showed Michael that his father respected him as an adult, capable of making his own decisions. It also reinforced the idea that Roger's role as a father wasn't to control every choice, but to offer support when needed. Michael began to feel more confident in his autonomy and more open to sharing his life with Roger. The relationship between them grew stronger, because Roger had stopped trying to be the decision-maker in Michael's life, and instead focused on being a supportive and non-judgmental parent. By eliminating the phrase, "I'm your mother and father, you have to listen to me," Roger was able to create a more balanced and healthy dynamic with his son. Michael no longer felt like his life was being dictated, and Roger began to see the value in respecting his son's decisions. This change in behavior doesn't just apply to career decisions, it sets the foundation for a more respectful, understanding relationship in all areas of life. When you're tempted to use phrases like this, consider the impact they can have on your relationship with your adult child. Instead of asserting control over their choices, try showing them respect and trust. You might say things like, "I trust your judgment and want you to feel supported in whatever decision you make. If there's anything I can do to help, or if you need advice, I'm here for you." This not only helps preserve their sense of autonomy, but it also fosters a relationship of mutual respect and understanding. Remember, your role as a parent evolves over time. While you may always be a guiding figure in their life, the authority you once held as a parent of a young child should give way to being a supportive adult who listens and respects their independence. In conclusion, the way we communicate with our adult children has a profound impact on the health of our relationships. The phrases we've explored, whether they stem from frustration, concern, or a desire for connection, often carry unintended consequences that can create distance, resentment, and even lasting harm. It's easy to fall into these patterns, especially when you feel worried or isolated, but the key to maintaining a healthy, fulfilling relationship with your children as they grow into adults is understanding the power of your words. As parents, your job evolves over time. It's no longer about controlling, instructing, or protecting them from every mistake, but about respecting their autonomy, supporting their choices, and nurturing the bond you share. While you will always be a parent, your role transforms into one of guidance, encouragement, and partnership. The 5 toxic phrases we've discussed are not simply innocent expressions. They are loaded with emotional weight that can create unnecessary barriers between you and your children. But the good news is, by recognizing these phrases and replacing them with more positive, supportive language, you can rebuild your relationships and create a space where love, respect, and understanding thrive. Remember, your adult children are individuals with their own paths, struggles, and dreams. Their relationships, careers, and personal decisions may not always align with your expectations, But by showing them that you respect their autonomy and trust their judgment, you lay the foundation for a deeper and more authentic connection. So, the next time you're tempted to say something that could cause a rift, pause and reflect on how your words might affect them. Instead of reinforcing a sense of obligation, guilt, or criticism, aim to foster a conversation that strengthens your relationship and nurtures the mutual respect you both deserve. Rebuilding relationships takes time, but by making small adjustments to how you communicate, you can transform your interactions and build stronger, more loving connections with your adult children. The effort is worth it because, in the end, it's not just about being right, it's about being there for each other through the ups and downs, with compassion and understanding. Your words have the power to heal or harm. Choose wisely and watch your family bonds flourish.